Warning: the following podcast features views and opinions that are likely to trigger the extreme fanboys and fangirls who disagree with them. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Hot Takes with Billy Biz, brought to you by Season 2 of Reboot It, streaming now on YouTube. Today, we are talking 2007's Transformers, and I have a new guest to the show. Season 3 finally got this guy in. He's a very busy guy. Hold on. Don't pause, because this is going to be maybe the biggest credentials I've ever had to read off for a single guest. He is the host of the Top 10 Show, The Cinephiles, The Geek Buddies. He's a Schmodown singles champion, a founding member of the Five Horsemen, and is a current team champion as one half of the Founding Fathers. And that was half the show right there. That was it. Ladies and gentlemen, the Outlaw himself, John ROCHA. Dude, finally.
I know it's been crazy. I mean, we were always so busy, and there was restrictions at my former outlet about what we could and couldn't be on, and so it's been nice to now be able to kind of go back to that life where you can go on people's shows and touch base and connect with people. It's been a lot of fun to be able to do that, so I'm excited to come on here, and you picked the perfect franchise to bring me on to talk about, because I love talking about this franchise, and I love kind of turning people around about it. I don't mind battling about it. I don't mind debating it, because I do enjoy it. It's a guilty pleasure of mine, but it's one that I defend thoroughly and passionately.
You and I were always a little bit of ships in the night. I would see you just briefly for a moment at a movie fights or something, but I feel like you're one of those people where I've listened to enough of your podcasts or watched enough of your shows that I feel like I know you, even though I don't. But I do remember this was back in the day when Screen Junkies Plus was still a thing, and the latest Transformers, I think it was, is it the something that the night? I can't remember.
The last night
was coming out, and we wanted to have you on the show, and you had such a passion for Transformers. Yeah. So I wanted to bring you on this show to talk about the first Transformers movie, because there's something that happens a lot, and I talk about this a lot on this show. I think that there's this thing that we do as people where we kind of generalize everything. It's like Transformers sucks. Well, why? Well, that last one was terrible. Yeah, but you just said Transformers sucks, right. And I think this first Transformers movie is a perfect example of something that maybe got rolled into an opinion that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with this first movie.
Yeah, I mean, this first movie is really the way. It's the one that people who even hate the franchise or are the ones that begrudgingly give this one credit and to like and to enjoy. But you're right. Sometimes you just lump it all in and say that this one sucks, and they'll point out to certain things. They'll point out actors. They'll point out storylines, or they'll point out the convoluted stuff that happens. By the way, it's 2.5 hours long, so it's a pretty long action movie. But I've got defenses for everything. I just really enjoy the movie, and it's one that if you hear from other people, oh, Transformers sucks, at least watch the first one and see what the potential of this franchise was going to be. You can decide for yourself if you like it or hate it after that, but the first one I think is an actually damn good movie.
So I see that you're wearing the Transformers shirt.
Yeah.
I got to know, what is kind of your history with Transformers just in general?
Well, many a morning and many an afternoon was spent in my youth watching Transformers, the animated series, over a bowl of Honey Smacks or whatever it was that I was eating in the morning, and then having a sandwich when I came home from school. It was great to watch the Transformers stuff, because I really enjoyed this idea of there was always a lesson at the end, right? Doing the right thing. You're always fighting evil. You're always finding a way to get together, and you don't punish evil in brutal or vicious ways. You just try to understand or try to stop them. It does get frustrating after a while, because you're like, well, just put them away already. But then the show would be over. So it was fun to watch this. He had a lot of interesting characters, great names, some great voiceover actors. Casey Kasem was in this thing. Scatman Crothers was the voice. Of course, you have Peter Cullen doing the voice there, Frank Welker. So there were so many great legendary voiceover artists and unusual voiceover artists that you wouldn't think to be in something like this. So there was so much about it that really appealed to me. And then getting the figures to play with, then collecting the comic books, the G1 comic books, that was fun for a majority of my youth and teen years. That was a blast.
So I feel like there was kind of call it a Mount Rushmore of late 80s, early 90s. And I think it would be He-Man,
Sure.
G.I. Joe, Ninja Turtles, and Transformers.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
I think it always surprises people, especially given kind of, like the stuff that I love. I think it surprises people that I was born in 1986. So I feel like I just missed the cutoff of all these great franchises. So for me, when I come into something like a Transformers, I said this in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I loved that 2014 movie, but I think part of the reason why I give these things, like I look at these through such different lenses, is I have no emotional attachment to these IPs. So when I came to Transformers, I don't even know to this day, like, are there humans in Transformers, like the cartoons?
Oh, yeah. There's a kid, and when you see the multiple animated series, sometimes there's a kid and his father. So there's always human beings that kind of anchor everything around him, because Optimus Prime always talks about the fact that we have to get along with humans. We have to function with humans. It's important to save the humans from the Decepticons. So they are protectors and friends at the same time. So humans have always been there to kind of anchor everything around the Transformers. Without them, then you don't really, who do you connect to? It starts to become something like something else that wouldn't quite have as much appeal, I think, for people who watch it.
Yeah, I always find it interesting that, when you talk about any of the Transformers movies or just the Transformers movie as a whole, like one of the biggest criticisms I hear is like, why does there have to be a human? I just want to see the robots. I'm like, but wait a minute. I feel like that is the same person who hated the Incredible Hulk because they felt like it was a video game with just two things smashing. So I never really understood that criticism of there's not enough robot. I personally feel like there's perfect amount of robot, and you have to have a human, or else what's happening around them, like, you have to show the scale of a Transformer.
Also, Billy, you know this as covering numerous movies for numerous years. You got to have a protagonist that the audience can connect to. As much as we may enjoy Bumblebee, we may enjoy Optimus Prime and all the other characters, there's something about seeing a human being there that kind of subconsciously works on us as a viewer, and we can connect with that person and experience what they're experiencing. They're our eyes in the movie, and we're just as blown away or sitting back and marveling at what we're experiencing through their eyes. So I think it's important to always have a human being in these things. AVP, right? Aliens versus Predators. They didn't mention humans, but there are humans involved in this. So you're always going to have humans. No studio is going to do one of these things like this without any humans. It doesn't make sense.
So, they put all their money on Shia LaBeouf, which let's take a moment here. I didn't want to do this, but I feel like you kind of have to. I didn't want to talk about Shia LaBeouf, the guy. I wanted to keep this about the movie, but I feel like my hand has been forced because I think people have turned. I don't think Shia LaBeouf turned himself into a joke. I really don't. I think people turned Shia LaBeouf into a joke, and I don't think it was fair. Sure, I get we all laughed at the green screen thing. We all laugh at the meme of him crying and clapping. I get it. Sure. But do you really mean to tell me that a movie automatically is terrible because Shia LaBeouf is in it? Because I think Shia LaBeouf is a better actor than a lot of people that we really respect in movies.
Yeah, I challenge you to find an actor who's more unfairly vilified, but you can't question his talent when you watch the movies that he's in. Plus, he's not doing like Nicolas Cage 700 movies a year. He's doing certain things that he picks out that he likes and he enjoys because he knows he can bring the best of his work to that role. We just saw him Peanut Butter Falcon. He's fantastic. Honey Boy is fantastic. This is a renaissance, because he did Holes. A lot of people fell in love with him with Holes. And then from there, the Transformers movies and a couple other things. And he went on his journey. Look, we all go through our things. How many of us at 19 and 18 have the world figured out? He's a sensitive artist, so maybe that fueled some of his stuff there in his later teens and 20s, and he's just going through his process as a human being, and look what came out the other side. We have this fantastic, grounded, emotionally vulnerable actor that we get to enjoy in things like I would even throw Fury, I guess, in there, because I know he was really good in Fury as well. But then you watch him, like I said, in Honey Boy and Peanut Butter Falcon. Those experiences he went through, and I went to go see him at that installation on was it Beverly when he was doing that installation. I remember yelling at him when I was there because I was saying to him, you snap out of this, break out of this. You've got too much talent to waste because you were allowed to say whatever you wanted to the person, then walk on, And so it was a very interesting to subject himself to. But I appreciated that because as an artist, and a lot of people aren't artists, they don't get it. Actors go on their own personal journeys, especially the great ones. The great ones have their own weird stuff that they go through because they don't look at the world the way we do. So they have to process it in their own way. And when they come out the other side, we are the better for it. So I think, people want to make fun, but in the end, the guy is killing it now.
I guess it was always strange. I wonder if it was a blessing and a curse that he kind of got the rub from Spielberg. He was like his hand-picked guy, but it's like, would you turn down if Steven Spielberg's like, I like you, kid, I'm gonna make something out of you, know? Would you turn it down?
Of course not. Especially if I'm being in a Transformers movie, I wouldn't turn it down at all.
Yeah, it's just strange. He went in my opinion, he went the career path that absolutely he was supposed to do. He did the Disney Channel show. He got his big break. He went and he did some big blockbusters with Transformers, and even though people don't think of it, like Eagle Eye, I think was a big one.
Eagle Eye was
Suburbia.
good. Yeah, Suburbia.
And it turned into this hate fest, and everyone thinks they're hilarious, like Shia LaBeouf, and you're like, yep, you said his name wrong. Yeah. Hysterical. But going back to watch this movie particular again, I guess there's kind of this joke. I don't know who cut it together, but it was on YouTube, and it was just this montage of him like no, and I kind of feel like you can make fun of that, but I feel like that frantic energy really brought something. It was the dichotomy that you needed with the Transformers, or else a lot of those comedy beats don't work.
Yeah, he's actually very sweet in the film as a kid who is just trying to succeed and make money and get a car and get the girl. Like most teenagers do in high school, they're just trying to do their thing and figure themselves out, trying to be cool, trying to figure out a way to get that girl so they can be cool to everybody else. So they're caught up in that image of it all. And so he's kind of put upon at times. It's a little bit, I don't know what you can say, but you can't blame it on the actor to me personally, because the editor's the one putting all those things together, and Michael Bay is the one directing him to say those things or do those things in the script. So what's Shia going to do? Screw you, Michael. Screw you, Steven. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm not going to say four no's here. No. And is this where you make your stand? It's the hill you're going to die on? I mean, he's just a young actor, and he's figuring it out as well. I think people don't give him enough of a break in that situation. And yeah, you can make fun of people like that, but they're making way more money than you are. So you feel free to make fun of them, but they're on a different path than you are. They're on a different process. And so you got to respect that to a degree.
I also think it's like, it does feel very deliberate, because when you think of like all the characters in this movie, it's like a weird alternate universe where everybody is kind of a cartoon, and I think that's okay. Like, especially if you're like, look, I know it's PG-13 and there are some sex jokes and everything, but this kind of is a kid's movie. It's a kid's movie.
Yeah.
And I think it's fine to have, especially his parents. I really love his parents, even when they started to maybe sprinkle the men too much later on the other movies. I still loved those parents.
Yeah, they have great chemistry. Julie White's a fantastic theater actress, and the other guy is the character actor. I think David Dunn is his name. I think he's been in a million things like Veep. They just have great chemistry, so it's a perfect addition to the film. And also, when you look at the combination of everything that works here, they're essential for comedy relief to all the madness that's going on. And I would say this, the cartoon nature of it all is on purpose. I mean, his last name is Witwicky. That's a funny name. It's supposed to give you this feeling that although all this really serious, crazy stuff is going on, the government, Sector 7, all this nutty stuff is happening, there is still humor throughout this whole thing. The screaming, the wow. I mean, Tyrese Gibson and the wow, wow, wow. All of that kind of stuff. You get it all as part of it, because I think people forget, and I'll tell you this, Billy, people forget, like, people think that the Transformer animated series was like the Citizen Kane of animated series. For God's sakes, it was weird. It was incoherent at times. The storylines were convoluted. It was weird in terms of the emotional beats and the scenes and some of the jokes that were made. So there was it fits. And if you go watch the Transformer animated movie, the same thing. There's some weird stuff going on in that movie that you're just like, is this adult or kids? I don't know. So you get the same vibe from the movie as well.
Any cartoon that has a character named Rodimus Prime, which sounds like a Dollar Tree ripoff of Optimus Prime.
Exactly.
Look, I think too, you kind of have to give it up to, like, when you look at the cast list for this movie,
Yeah.
it feels like a Mad Libs. You know, like Shia LaBeouf, Tyrese, John Turturro, John Voight, Bernie Mac. You're like, what am I watching? What is this?
Right.
Like, it does feel very eclectic, which maybe feels a little manic, but to me, I kind of find it a little endearing. Like the Bernie Mac scene, especially, where it's just like, obviously this didn't have to be in the movie. You could have trimmed right past this and just
Good
he got
point.
the car and that's it. But it's like, I don't know. It's like a diversion that I don't mind because it's Bernie Mac. Like, he sets the tone like, yeah, this is a little weird. It's a little like Michael Bay has kind of a weird, like, 90s dad sense of humor.
Yes,
but
he does.
let's roll with it.
Yeah, I mean that's his style. You take it or leave it, and look, the series made $4.5 billion, so a lot of people took it for sure,
Right.
over and over again. You don't make $4.5 billion going once, a bunch of people going once. So they do enjoy the humor, and you're right. Watching it and rewatching it, I watched it ahead of time before the show, and you're right. There's the Latino jokes, there's the grandma jokes. There's the "Are you on the internet again?" jokes. There's these really easy, low-hanging fruit jokes that he plays, and that's just his style. He's very much in cahoots with the military, which is why he's able to use all the things he can in all his movies, because he very much honors and respects the military. But within that, he does, throw in his dad jokes to kind of even things out and throw a little comic relief in there. And you roll your eyes at it, but you do allow yourself a chuckle or two when you hear them. They're not offensive dad jokes,
Not yet, at least.
Yeah, right. As we go along, sure.
But I mean,
fair.
that's the perfect like example though of what I mean when like the Transformers movie have racist humor. It's like, I'm not going to argue and say you're wrong, but
Right.
that's also like that comes a little later. Like that's
Right.
another criticism that's rolled into this one. Like, the plot makes no sense. It's like, no, the plot for the first one, maybe it's a little like long-winded, but it makes total sense.
Yeah, they do try to connect the pieces up. Yeah.
And I definitely think, just like Shia LaBeouf, just like everything we've been talking about, you mentioned Michael Bay. I kind of feel too like this was another start of like, the minute you saw a Michael Bay film on a trailer, everyone just rolled their eyes and said, nope. It's like, wait a minute. This was the guy that before this had brought you Bad Boys,
Yeah.
The Rock, The Island, which is a fantastic movie that I feel like generations keep finding later on past the fact. Armageddon, like,
Yeah.
it was like all of a sudden maybe one or two Transformers movies that people didn't like, and all of a sudden Michael Bay is like unwatchable. It's like, you guys still praise a lot of those movies today.
Yeah. I mean, I would throw Pain and Gain in that
Oh,
conversation.
I love Pain and Gain.
Pain and Gain is 13 hours. I mean, I think these are really... You can't argue that he isn't a good director who makes well-made films. They may not be your taste. And I understand those Transformers films, for some people, the later ones, are not their taste. And I get it. Trust me, I get it. But you can't deny that he directs a fantastic movie. The action itself is always fast-paced. Everything is shiny and bright. And yeah, that's the jingling keys and whatever. But it still works when you're watching something like this, an action film. You want to be taken into the movie and the pulsating soundtrack. By the way, he gets great composers for his movies as well. The pulsating soundtracks, the loud bangs, the explosions, you're constantly moving. All of that, if you let yourself get caught up in it, then you have a good time. I think too many people walk into a movie and go, this better be The Godfather or I'm out of here. And it's
Right.
it's frustrating to me because I'm like, these are action movies. They're not meant to be taken seriously. They're meant for you to relax and have some fun. And there are some bad action movies. I'm not going to deny that. But I think the technique of Michael Bay can't be argued. When you watch his behind the scenes that they do on these movies, and I've watched all the behind the scenes in all these movies, yes, he's an arrogant person. He's conceited. He loves himself very much. People talk about him all the time. He is surrounded by beautiful young women all the time. There's all those stories. But at the same time, you're also watching how meticulous he is, how particular he is. I mean, just 267 moves are in the transformation of Optimus Prime in the first movie. After that, it's even more moves because he is so, I don't know what you call it, but anal retentive about every single movement, every single piece on the body of a Transformer or Decepticon. That's the kind of care you want from someone who is going to take on this franchise. It's not going to be 5 blocks that move into things. It's literally every little piece. And so I appreciate the attention to detail that he brings to films like this.
I mean, the visual effects in this movie, for a movie that came out 13 years ago,
Yeah.
are still pretty astonishing. And like
yeah.
you just said, like if you can, if you have this movie, go back and watch like anytime a car or something transforms, and really just almost go frame by frame, because it's quite amazing that this group of artists was able to find a way to actually make it all make sense with so many moving pieces. I haven't seen anything like that, really.
Yeah, it does. I mean, you can look at the opening scene where they battle at the base, where that the helicopter lands and they battle at the base. Incredible. You look at the highway scene, right? That does not look like they've CGI'd the Transformers and Decepticons in there. That totally, absolutely works. And you get the vibe. I mean, up until the point where that car screeches with that woman and her child, that really feels like they're actually fighting right outside the window. And it's brilliant move. And it reminds me a little bit of Extraction. I think Extraction, which I just saw, is the closest thing I've seen to something like Michael Bay in quite some time, because they take you inside the car and outside the car as the action is actually happening, and that's brilliant camera work and brilliant editing. And so those are those kinds of things you want to see in a film like this, and he makes it work. And you're right, you can look at this is 13 years ago and it still holds up for the visual effects in it. Yeah.
So look, I'm not saying this movie's perfect. There are a few movies that are.
I don't think any are, but yeah, go ahead.
Let's talk a little bit maybe about some of the stuff that maybe I'm not quite into and just get your take on it.
Okay.
I definitely think that there are kind of three stories, essentially, or three groups that we're following. There's Sam and Michaela. There's Tyrese and Josh Duhamel, Lennox and Epps. Yep. And then there's Anthony Anderson and Maggie, the kind of the data analysts.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like that third one was like one thread too many in this movie. I feel like that's the one that we spend the least amount of time with, gets developed the least, I remember the least, and also could have easily been explained away as just like, hey, we figured this out.
Right. But this is, once again, Michael Bay wanting to be cutting edge with his movies, not only with the visual effects and the technique that he uses in these movies, but also, wanting computer stuff put in there, hacking stuff put in here, all this stuff. And back then in 2007, that was a big deal. The idea of hacking, the idea of getting into systems. Hackers were anonymous. All of that was going on around 2007. So all of this was kind of new and people wanted to see it. So he threw it in there as a storyline. And look, he picked a woman to be an analyst in this situation. Yeah, she's a beautiful actress, can't deny that, but she's still good in what she's doing. And I think it's the actress in Jennifer Jones. Oh, sorry, what's the name of that one? Sorry, I forget that one. Jessica Jones. I think she's her friend in Jessica Jones, that actress. So you get an actress who does good work, and she did a nice job in this thing. But I get, yeah, absolutely, you could cut it out, but that's Anthony Anderson bringing you some comedy relief, eating the donuts. And I'm not going to fault him. He's wearing a Redskins jersey. That's my football team from youth. So I got no problems with the kid.
Yeah, look, again, it's one of those things where it's like, even the stuff that I'm like, okay, fine. Like, it's still, like, even the stuff that doesn't need to be there, at least is entertaining within itself.
Yeah.
Which I appreciate. I just think, like, you could have shaved maybe 20 minutes off this behemoth of a movie.
You're not wrong. I was actually thinking the same thing as I was finishing up the movie. I was like, there's about 20 to 30 minutes he could have cut here. Absolutely. But it's Michael Bay. He's gonna, I'm sure the studio was like, all right, make what you want to make. And when it made as much as it made, they were like, damn, he's gonna keep making these until he runs out of money. So this is the way it worked. And every single one, I think, has increased in length as it's gone along. So certainly he has a formula he followed up until it didn't work. But this one, certainly 2.5 hours, you could have totally shaved 30 minutes out of this one, and it still would have been as effective and as good, I think, as the cut you have now.
What a sign of the times, though. I still laughed at the joke where he's Anthony Anderson. They've been caught. And he's like, "What? I downloaded a few songs. Who hasn't?" Like, it was such like a dated but still funny for the moment joke.
Oh, yeah.
So you're right. Like, look, I don't need that in there. The movie doesn't need that in there. But if you're gonna be there, at least make me crack a smile, I suppose.
Right.
Another thing about this movie that really bothered me at the time, but I think as I get older, it bothers me less and less, but kind of want to get your take, not just this movie, but movies in general, because it's happening a lot now. There's a lot of product placement in this movie. Like, a lot.
Yeah.
Obviously, the cars, which look, I have no issue with that at all.
That's part of it, yeah.
There's, the Nokia thing. There's eBay. I used to have, I don't know if it was like, just me being idealistic, like, no, this is not artistic. But now I kind of feel like as I get older with movies in general, it's like, yeah, like the Krispy Kreme thing in Power Rangers is just like, all right, I get it. But I would rather a character use eBay than like auctionsite.com or just drink a Pepsi instead of just random cola, I don't know. What are your thoughts kind of on product placement in general and in this movie?
I think it has to be organic within the movie. If it becomes obvious, then you start to feel like the Krispy Kreme situation where you're like, okay, I get it. Or Back to the Future, by the way, people don't point this out, but Pepsi is all over that franchise, all three movies. So give me a break. It is so overt in your favorite film franchise. So this idea of being upset about product placement, I get when it's like not organically done, then it becomes like, ridiculous. And I love the way that Ricky Bobby did it in that Talladega Nights, where it's so it's so obvious that it's there to be made fun of. But in this one, I think it flows organic. I mean, look, it's a film about talking cars, moving cars. You're going to make a deal with a car manufacturer so you can use their cars. So to me, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me like it doesn't bother me in Bond films when we see all those different cars. Those are all done to promote, a certain company. That's the way it goes. I don't think anything in this film is overtly product placement that feels inorganic for me. I'm just like, yeah, people do drink Coke, people do eat donuts, people do drive these cars, people do ride little motor scooters, people do little things like that in their lives. So to me, it doesn't necessarily feel out of place in this movie.
So there's a criticism. I'm literally just, as you're talking, I'm pulling up the Rotten Tomato score because I wanted to talk about just the reaction. Yeah. And just out of the corner of my eye, just right there, I saw one of the reviews that instantly, I think, summed up like exactly what I think is a very strange take on this movie. And it was a lazy CGI fest. And I think you could call this movie a lot of things, even if you don't like this movie at all. Yeah. You could call it a lot of things. You cannot call this lazy.
You're right.
You cannot look up at that screen and think like, well, nobody put care into this. I mean, for God's sakes, Michael Bay directed the commercials for the tie-in products for this movie.
Right.
I think lazy. It feels like one of those words that people use to criticize, but they don't necessarily know exactly what it means.
Right. And this is a larger discussion, is it? I mean, because to me, that's a lazy film reviewer making a lazy film review. And this is where we get to the issue that's been going on over the last couple of years in fandom and criticism, right? That sometimes fans are really upset when they sense critics are overtly trying to destroy something or relishing, taking their brains out and showing off how smart they are and how above this film they are and writing these film reviews when they don't have to. And that pisses fans off. And we see them now over the last couple of years really rebelling and fighting back. Do I think bombing a score, an audience score for a movie is the correct way about it? No. But I think calling out critics who you sense are overtly doing it is absolutely within the realm of fandom because, look, you're not a critic if we're not reading your stuff. If we don't patronize your stuff, you're not a critic. That's how it works. And if no one wants to read your stuff, guess what? You're not going to have a job. So to me, I think there has to be a middle ground here where you respect the fandom. You can still tear a film apart. I think you have to do it in a tactful way that is respectful to the fandom, but doesn't have to be overtly mean or overtly brutal. And I think something like that, lazy CGI fest, when it's like, that's the stupidest thing you can say about it because it absolutely does not radiate lazy in any sense of. It can be overwhelming. It can be too much. It can be, he's showing off. All of that are legitimate criticisms. Lazy is not.
Yeah, I mean, I always, when someone's, I've had this conversation with many people and they're like, well, what do you consider lazy filmmaking? And I always point to X-Men Origins Wolverine. I always say there's a moment with Gambit where he is punched and then 40 seconds later he's running on a roof and jumps down and hits Wolverine. They're like, what's lazy? I'm like, what's lazy is they didn't do a pickup shot of him dusting himself off, looking up at the roof. Like, that's lazy filmmaking, where it's like you create logic holes because you're just too lazy to plan ahead and look and see what you need. The other thing with that review, too, of CGI Fest, I think part of what makes Transformers, the first movie at least, feel so cool and has that sense of like, whoa, is that it's the opposite. Yes, there's a lot of CGI, but there's just as much, if not more, practical locations. This isn't the Star Wars prequels where nothing is real. Right. That's the Hoover Dam. That is a real freeway bridge. You know, I feel like people overlook some of these Transformers movies. Is like, ugh, CGI. I'm like, yeah, but go back and look. Even some of the sequels, it's like, those are real places, real sets. And it's such a disservice to all the stunt teams and everyone who does do a lot of that work.
And also all the scout teams who go and find location scout teams who go and find these locations for Michael Bay or the director to use, you know, Travis Knight with Bumblebee. They go out and find these locations for people to, or for those directors to shoot at. So that tells you right there, there's a lot of time and care put in by everybody involved in the production. I mean, you can't make almost a 3-hour action film with all this visual effects and not have some kind of extreme amount of effort put in to make it all look realistic and organic as you're watching it. Look at all the MCU films. You'll still see that occasional Robert Downey Jr. floating head out of the CGI. So you tell me. I mean, there's just as much CGI in all those films. Endgame, for the love of God, is full of CGI, yet somehow that isn't being vilified in the way that other films are. Because it's convenient to the narrative of criticizing that film. So I think Transformers, you're right, gets unfairly criticized for that because there are a lot of actual locations on Earth that are being used in those films.
I still think one of the coolest set pieces that they have in that entire movie is where Megatron is kind of frozen and they're like unearthing this huge thing. Like, that just looks incredible. It doesn't look fake. It looks like, I could reach out and touch this like frozen piece of metal.
Yeah.
Speaking of Megatron, I never realized this like the first time that I watched this movie. I think because you're pretty engrossed in it. But Megatron, he doesn't come into this movie until it's almost over.
Yeah, once again, this is a gutsy decision. You know why? Because Michael Bay knew this was going to be a series of films. So for him, bringing Megatron in early would have kind of blown the wad, because then you immediately have Optimus Prime versus Megatron, and fans are only going to be consumed by that. When are they going to meet? When are they going to meet? Whereas if you have him buried and then there's the expectation of, oh man, just wait till he wakes up. Just wait till he wakes up. So it builds to when it does, and then they have this titanic battle there in the city at the end, and that's what you're waiting for. If you unearth him too early, then you're going to have him fighting Optimus Prime like 3 or 4 times in the movie, and that'll get to be a bit too much, especially for an origin film. So right. I like this idea. And Starscream needs a little attention every once in a while. You know, he wants it, so it works out. And you get someone like Hugo Weaving to do the voice instead of Frank Welker. You've got an incredible actor. Put him on ice for a little bit. Let people wait in anticipation. And when he shows up with all the ferocity, all the beats from the animated series, making fun of Starscream, saying he let him down again because, you know, Starscream wants to lead Decepticon, ripping Jazz in half, and then coming down and jumping on top of Optimus and almost killing him if it wasn't for the cube. Yeah.
Oh man, I loved Jazz. And I don't think people realize the voice of Jazz is Eddie Winslow from Family Matters.
Yes.
Darius McQuarrie. Right. I love Optimus is just like, oh, Jazz at the end when Jazz,
I don't know why. Body parts.
That's just like my favorite line of that whole movie is, oh, Jazz. So you as a Transformers fan going into this movie, was your opinion when you walked out like that was it, they nailed it, or did it take some time? Because I'm sure you must have in your head for years and years and years built up what a real Transformers movie would look like.
Yeah, I'd say I walked out and I loved it because I'm a Michael Bay fan already. So I walked in hoping it was good. And here's the irony: I'm not actually the biggest The Rock fan. I'm not. I'll take his other films over The Rock. But there's something when I walked out of Transformers, I just was like, okay, this is a interesting new take on it, is what because I didn't want to go in and watch the 80s cartoon again. I've already seen that. I've already consumed that. And they already reached the pinnacle with that 80s Transformers movie of what those 80s cartoons could be for Transformers. Now I wanted to see what this director, this visually incredible, unique, dynamic, groundbreaking director can do with this property, and he did it. I mean, I'm not the biggest Josh Duhamel fan. He's good in the movie. Tyrese is good in the movie. Megan Fox is good in the movie. Like
she is, yeah.
Right? There are so many people who are good in the movie, and he did a great job of combining all these different actors, noted actors like John Turturro and Jon Voight, and younger actors like Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox, and everybody involved in it. It just works all around. And throw in Bernie Mac and throw in Anthony Anderson. You got so much that you can work with here. So when I walked out of it, I was like, that was awesome. I remember thinking, that was awesome. And I went back and saw it again later that weekend to watch it again because I just wanted to marvel at what he was able to do. Now, that being said, did I think he absolutely nailed the story or grabbed the mythology of the Transformers fully? No. And I think that's what's always going to be the complaint that people have about these Transformers movies is they don't 100% grab the G1 storylines as like these nostalgic things we can all kumbaya around. But he was trying to do something different, something new, something interesting. And for as much as people bash Zack Snyder, and I know people are going to be upset that I invoked the holy name of Zack Snyder, I appreciate that Zack wanted to take some chances with these heroes. Like, I like when people take chances and directors take chances. I love Man of Steel. So it's just those kinds of things that I'm open to seeing new things. I don't want to see a rehash of the same vibe in another director's skin, And so I like that Michael Bay took a chance on these and had some fun with them. Hey, that's what you got to do. It's talking cars. Have some fun,
But there's also like, since you invoked the name of our Lord and Savior, there's also a there's a beam of positivity that comes from this film that I guess, in rewatching it, I guess I didn't even realize. It's like there's, the piousness of an Optimus Prime. It's like the social responsibility is actually pretty high where he's like, look, we came to your world.
Right.
We didn't mean to mess it up. We're not trying to kill you guys because of our fight with them.
Right.
But we thank you for letting us stay here. I don't know. There's just like this like strangely, this dichotomy of like Transformers, explosions, but also like social responsibility and positivity.
Well, I think that's what always drew me to the cartoon as well as a kid, because my parents were always teaching me social responsibility as the son of immigrants in this country. Like, I was always taught about how to act and interact in the country. So watching those lessons come through Transformers as a cartoon, seeing the movie invoke that again at the end, I thought was great, because they always end with a lesson. They always end with Optimus saying some speech that gets everybody feeling great about things again until the next Decepticon attack. And so the same thing happened here. And I love the song that's playing there as he's looking out. It's a great visual, man. So
I just got chills thinking about the end of that. I love that it's like, this is Optimus Prime. If you can hear me, this is where we are, and like we're ready. It's like, no matter what I thought of the movie in the moment, it's like a movie's only as good as its like ending scene. And I was like, yep, let's go, bring more to Earth. I know a big sticking point with fans before this movie came out, and this was actually a very lengthy discussion that I had when I did the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles episode with JTE. The design. A lot of fans, like I said, they know what Optimus Prime, they know what Megatron and all these people are supposed to look like, and then adapting that to film is always going to be a little bit different. Were you happy with the design? Did it not look like them to you, or was it like, nope, that's probably what it would look like?
No, I loved it. I mean, you're transferring from animated into live action, so why would you do in 2007 what they did in 1985? It just wouldn't make any sense. All these block sections that move around. That's Voltron. Look at the Voltron design. That was completely different than what you saw in the cartoon and in the toys that came out. They were different, updated, and I liked that he updated the look of Optimus Prime, the look of Megatron. I didn't 100% like the look of Megatron, but I appreciated the fact that he was willing to update it, make it different, make it modern. For people like you, Billy, who've never watched the animated series, you're not attached to the look of these things. It's like, well, what do they look like? And it's like, okay, I could buy that in 2007. That looks logical about the way they would appear and the colors that they would use, like that. And the big complaint is always like, I can't tell who's fighting who, and that's fair. That's absolutely fair, and I think that's tough for Michael Bay to do when you're shooting close up on these Decepticons and Transformers fighting each other, or Autobots and Decepticons fighting each other. So it's just like, that's what you have to deal with when you're seeing a movie like this. But yeah, I love the look of them. I like the updated look. And look, we got the regular look in the Bumblebee. How much money did that make? I'm just saying. People like the updated stuff. They enjoy it.
This came at an interesting time. I think 2007, really around 2007, 2008 is kind of when I feel like the internet became the internet, if that makes sense. And I feel like the summer of 2000, to me, it's like in baseball terms, it was a transitional year. We were wrapping up Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, and I think it didn't go the way a lot of people wanted to, even though I kind of like that movie. It also kind of was like dipping their toe back in the water with Die Hard. And, when you look back at 2007 as kind of like teeing up the juggernaut that was 2008, I feel like Transformers was right on the cusp of like kind of a change in the way that we took in blockbusters and kind of a way that we saw movies. And I owe a lot of that, or I place a lot of that on both Iron Man the next year and The Dark Knight. So I know we're talking about the first Transformers movie, but I do feel like, yes, the writer's strike with the sequel definitely kind of made things a little bit more difficult. But I also just feel like those two movies in tandem, and really I think The Dark Knight long term changed a lot of people's perceptions on what a movie should be, not necessarily for the right reasons. But I do think that Transformers almost was kind of like caught in this wave of like tastes were changing, and the way people watched movies were changing, and the way people were like, well, I'm an adult now. I don't care that your property is a children's property like a Batman. Turn it into something that adult me wants. And I wonder if that kind of had something to do with the sequels moving forward. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, there was a change. People had come of age. The people who had grown up with this stuff had come of age, or the people who had come the generation after were hitting their 20s when these things came out, or mid-20s, and so they were getting caught up in what was happening here. And so, yes, I want to see what you can do. I mean, because before this, we had Pirates of the Caribbean, we had, like, they weren't as explosively expansive. And Michael Bay said, give me the money, I'm going to show you what I can do. Ahead of Iron Man, ahead of The Dark Knight, I'm going to show you what's possible in cinema now and the scope of what you can do with a film. And so, for better or worse, that's what he kind of made him an anomaly at that time. And I think, and I don't think you can deny this, I think it did influence Iron Man and what was possible. I think it did influence The Dark Knight to a lesser degree of what was possible. I mean, Dark Knight is a long film. Iron Man, not so much, but the Iron Man special effects, you could connect that to Transformers, absolutely, showing what was possible, in the air, on the ground, transforming, his suit, all the things that his suit does, all through Iron Man, same thing. So you've got this. I think you would make a great point, Billy. It influenced what was coming, and you sense the change here. But as the movies went along, I think Bay at times got caught up with trying to recapture that, and so he kept pushing the boundaries as far out as possible. And I think that's where fans started to slowly start to turn off from it finally last night. You can only, I mean, once you take them into the medieval times and the Nazis, like once you bring in the Nazis in anything, it's like you've kind of reached the end of the line of any franchise. You got to start out with the Nazis, like Raiders of the Lost Ark. You can't end with the Nazis because that's the end of your franchise.
I have to admit, I dropped off after Dark of the Moon, and not because I didn't like it. I actually thought Dark of the Moon is probably my second favorite of all of these. I actually don't even mind Revenge of the Fallen as much as some of the others do. I definitely think you're right that it was... I think the writer's strike hurt that one a lot. I think they'll be the first to tell you that. And I definitely think that they saw, especially with the IMAX stuff, with Dark Knight, like, oh, let's do that.
Yeah.
But it's weird because, look, I have no proof. This is just a hunch. This is just me. But I specifically remember I went and I saw Transformers July 4th weekend opening. Yeah. And then I saw it again when they re-released it. I think it was September in IMAX theaters. And it had a little bit extra footage. And I just remember that I had seen a couple movies in IMAX before. I think Superman Returns or something.
Right.
But Transformers in IMAX, I was like, whoa, this is like a whole different experience. And I kind of feel like it was almost like that maybe didn't influence Christopher Nolan, but it certainly, I think, showed the studios that it's like, hey, if you put something on a big screen, people will come and see it. And what better, like, I now regret not seeing every other Transformers movies in in IMAX. Did you get a chance to see it in IMAX?
Yeah, I did, and I just saw the last night when it came out in IMAX. That was when they were having the screenings for us at the time. They had it in an IMAX theater because they know themselves this is the scope of the movie, and it's the best place to watch these kinds of movies. In preparation for our show, I rewatched it again on 4K because I bought the 4K version of it. I have a LG OLED, so it is beautiful with the blacks and the colors in the film. So when you put it on 4K, it's like reliving the IMAX version all over again, or as close as you can come. And it's a beautiful movie, a gorgeous movie. And so when you watch it, it takes you up in it, and you're like, yeah, this is what his intention was to try to do something really cinematic in the best sense of that word.
It also just sound like, look, I am such a sucker for filmmakers that kind of mess with the opening studio logos. I can't think of anything, maybe Tron Legacy, but I can't think of anything cooler than every single time I watch this movie of the stars in the Paramount making those just incredible surround sound, like transforming noises. Like, again, like I don't know how you could, at least for this first one, I don't know how you can't get sucked into like at least the spectacle of it all. It's like a bad WrestleMania. It's still WrestleMania. It still looks and feels big, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, the Undertaker still fights in that. He's still fighting in that cemetery. It's still real, and what have you. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think this one is the one that if you're going to take a chance on it, this is the one that you have to watch and see if you like it, and then go forward from there. But yeah, because of that, you get that feeling from the beginning that it's an inventive film from the beginning. That's why calling it lazy is so ridiculously stupid, because it is not lazy. Every single effort is made to make this thing unique and different, eye-popping, eye-catching, and interesting. If it doesn't work for you, that's your subjective desire not to have it work for you, and you have every right to that. But I think for a lot of us, and for $4.5 billion worth, it did work, for the most part.
I just think it's kind of funny, too, that... Bumblebee. I saw Bumblebee. I loved Bumblebee. Yeah. I think Bumblebee's such a great time. But everything that it got praised for, this is what it's stripping it down, and the relationship. I'm like, that's all in the first one. Again, I think you guys are just lumping all of the Transformers movies together, because all that heart is at least definitely in that first movie. Yeah. And a boy, or, in Bumblebee's case, a girl, like a kid in their car, that's still there. That's all there. Yep. Yeah, it's maybe a little bit dinkier 90s dad humor and a little bit longer, but it's still, I guess that's where I just don't understand why people, I guess I do understand. It's because it's easier to just say Transformers sucks and not have to parse out like, okay, the first Transformer is good, the second's not as good, third one's pretty good, then I don't like you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm always confused by people who defend the prequels but bash Transformers. I'm just always confused by that, because I'm like, I can find you 5 million things that are wrong with those prequels just as much as you can find 5 million things that are wrong with the Transformers movies. So it just cracks me up, because it's about preference, about taste. I'll take a terrible Star Wars movie over a terrible Transformers movie. A lot of Star Wars fans think that way, but I'm like looking at them both going, which one excited me most, which one interested me most? It was the Transformers movies. Yeah, I think that's my point of view on it.
I also just think there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what this movie was aiming to be. Even looking at the critical consensus on Rotten Tomatoes, this sentence: while believable characters are hard to come by, the effects are staggering and the action's exhilarating. Like, I don't think that they were going for like a soup. Like, it's a cartoon. Right. It's a cartoon. I feel like that's missing the point a little bit. But even so, this has a rating of 58%, which honestly is higher than I thought it was going to be. But honestly, this is just kind of it's not a problem with Rotten Tomatoes. It's a problem with people's conception of Rotten Tomatoes. It's like 58% does not mean an F. It's not like a test in high school. Yeah. A 58% is not a failing grade. That means, if anything, I feel like people should actually start looking at movies that have the 50 and 60%, because those are the ones that's like, if people are pretty split on this, that makes me really interested to go see that movie. Yeah. So I feel like, with this one, and Cinema Score on this one was an A. It was an A. People, that means audiences got it.
Yeah, audiences loved it. That's why it made as much money as it's made every film afterwards, except for the last one. How much money it's made is all about the audience being excited to go back and watch it over and over and over again. And whatever your feelings are about that, your feelings are about that, but you can't deny the profit of the movie. It doesn't mean that it's a good franchise or these are good movies. That's a subjective thing. It does mean they're successful, though. You can't argue that. And certainly there was enough people coming back. I mean, these things were making billions before making a billion was commonplace. You know what I'm saying? That's the thing that you have to give credit to Michael Bay and the studio for doing. I think that's essential to point out as well. But yeah. I mean, this
thing made $709 million in 2007. 2020, that easily cracks $1 billion.
Yeah.
In 2020 money. But even so, like, we've seen huge properties be trotted out in the last, call it 5 years, that don't even come close to this level of success that I think people think like, yeah, well, it was Transformers. Of course it was going to make money. It's like, no. This one was a gamble. Yeah. I think people take for granted that this first Transformers movie, they weren't really sure if the interest was going to be there or not. And I think maybe, they overestimated with, G.I. Joe a couple of years later that because Transformers must mean that this was going to happen.
That's a perfect comparison, Billy, for your argument here. Absolutely true. G.I. Joe, you could say the same thing. Well, of course, G.I. Joe is going to make money. G.I. Joe, those first two films combined didn't make as much as this movie. Combined didn't make as much as this movie globally. So that tells you there was something going for this movie that made it unique and different. And I take issue with people say they're not believable characters. Of course they're believable characters. They're just, and this is why you cast the way you cast, because you want to bring actors who are going to bring life to these characters without having you go, well, I was born in 1935 and I went through this and went through. You don't need any of that. You need strong actors who step in and you immediately gravitate to them and enjoy their, that's why you cast John Voight and John These are master actors. Later on, Frances McDormand, Kelsey Grammer. These are master actors that bring life to their characters. Stanley Tucci. They bring life to the characters because that's what takes the place of exposition. You immediately buy this person in the position that they're in and you go with them. I think Shia does a great job being a young kid trying to figure out his life. I think Megan Fox is great as this young girl who's like from the wrong side of the tracks, which you initially don't think she is until you hear about the fact that her dad's in jail. She's got a juvie record, and that switches the relationship. I dig that. In the middle of this movie, all this stuff going on, all of a sudden the switch happens where Shia's like, you know what, maybe I don't want to be with you because you're a juvenile delinquent or you're a person with a crime. And she's like, oh, really? Well, let me tell you why that happened. And there you get the exposition. These are believable characters. John Boyd himself coming in as defense secretary. He's got a job to do, and it progressively gets more and more nuts, and even he yells at Sector 7 for keeping those secrets. So to me, everyone is believable in the movie. That kind of cop-out criticism, I think it's just, you don't understand why directors are doing what they're doing in these movies and casting the way they do.
Also, shout out to, and I wish I could remember the actor's name. He played Taub in House, and he's the teacher at the beginning.
Oh yeah, that
and
guy.
When he puts up the sign,
the stop sign,
that is one of the, it gets me every single time. I always forget about that joke, and it is never not funny. Yeah, I guess the only responsibility. The only thing that I guess that they set up, which was really cool, and I get not even like a criticism. I just wish I could have seen more of it. Seeing the Allspark turn that little phone into a transformer was awesome, and that kind of could have been cool if we had just started to see random things turn in, but it didn't happen. But I really liked that. That sequence is awesome where that phone turns into a transformer.
Yeah.
Evil transformer.
You get the steering wheel, you get the vending machine, and you get whatever he's holding, whatever that guy's holding. So you see the power of the Allspark to turn electronic objects into things of terror, so you do have a sample of it, and maybe that's Michael Bay just laying the seed for that to come later on in the other films. So
yeah, look, ultimately, if this movie's mission statement was just like, how do we just take something that, look, and I don't mean this critically, I don't even mean this condescendingly, how do we take something that's kind of silly, talking cars, and just entertain the hell out of people on a hot summer day? And if that's what the mission was, in my book, that was a success.
Yeah. And not only your book, a lot of people's books, from the $700 million it made globally. Yeah, people
need to realize, like, when a movie makes that much money. That doesn't mean that 700 some odd million people went and saw it once.
No.
That means a lot of people went back and saw it a lot of times.
Whether they want to accept that fact or not. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the Nickelback theory, man. It's like everyone hates Nickelback, but someone's buying it,
Someone's going to those concerts and selling them out. Good point.
It's definitely the Nickelback theory of economics for Transformers. But ultimately, yeah, I really do enjoy this movie. Even watching this first one, it made me want to keep going, and I think I will. I think you're right. I definitely need to pick up those 4Ks because that's the way to watch these.
Yeah, they're incredible. And because people bash them, those films are not usually that expensive. You can get that one for like under $40 or under $50 depending on sales. I bought it at Black Friday for $25 last year. I had to have it. So, yeah, I would recommend it.
Yeah, I think if anyone's been on the fence or kind of, isn't sure, maybe you've heard things about Transformers, like I said, give this one a watch.
Yeah.
It doesn't require you to have seen anything before it. Clearly, I liked it and I know nothing. And it doesn't require you to watch anything after if you want to hop off right then and there. But I think this is a good time. I've had a good time talking about this with you, man. I feel like I've gotten to finally connect with you a little bit. And, we have the same taste in wrestling. We have similar tastes here. Where can everyone find you? Because I listed off 55 things that people should go find you in.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. And thanks for having me on, Billy. This was a blast. It was nice revisiting the first film. It had been a bit, so it was great to talk with you about it. You can follow me at The Rocha Says on Twitter and on Instagram. And please head on over to my YouTube channel, youtube.com/John Rocha Says. It's the Outlaw Nation YouTube channel. I'm trying to turn it into my own little outlet myself. And so go and watch that. I just interviewed Isa Lopez on there. I'll be having Greg Nicotero coming on for an interview as well very soon. And I just had Danny Fernandez on the Outlaw Nation show. So a lot happening there, covering pro wrestling, entertainment, movies, television, sports. It's all there on the Outlaw Nation channel as I build this thing out. And of course, the Cinephiles, Top 10, and the Geek Buddies, all the podcasts that I do currently every week. You can go and enjoy them. We haven't taken a day off or taken a week off because of this coronavirus stuff. We're pounding out episodes for people to enjoy as they pass the time self-isolating or self-quarantining. So there you go. Oh, and Twitch. Come find me at Twitch. Sorry, the Outlaw Nation, one word, lowercase, on Twitch. All right, that's it. I'm done. Thank you.
Well, I got to say, the audience is a podcast. They can't see it, but I'm looking at your setup, man. Your camera's great. Your background's great. Everything's great. So I'm looking forward to checking that out. And thank you guys for checking out Hot Takes with Billy Biz. Once again, you can check out Reboot It Season 2 on YouTube. We talked about the Mount Rushmore of 80s cartoons. Today we talked about Transformers. But next week, we're hitting another one on the Mount Rushmore. Mr. Hal Rednick is joining me to talk about the movie we just referenced, G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra. I really like that movie. We're going to find out why this one didn't hit quite as big as Transformers did. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you all next week.